The June 30th, 2022 meeting will come, of the Woodbridge Township Board of Education will please come to order. Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Here.
Ms. Bourdain?
Here.
Mr. Del Pietro?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Molnar?
Here.
Mr. Treewasser?
Here.
And Mr. Velez.
Here. Mr. Secretary, as required by the Sunshine Law, please read the notice of meetings.
Thank you, Mr. President. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this Act, the Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted as follows. On January 11th, 2022, emailed to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and the Municipal Clerk's Office, posted in Ross Street School Number 11, and the Board of Education Administration Building, also published on the school district website.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Molnar, please read the closed session statement.
Thank you, Mr. President. In compliance with the Sunshine Law, the board must go into closed session in order to discuss subjects exempt from the public portion of our meeting. The discussions to be held in closed session will be regarding personnel matters. Any information regarding the closed session discussion will be released to the public when reasons for discussing these matters in closed session no longer exist.
Thank you, Mr. Molnar. I have a motion by Mr. Molnar. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Molnar. I have a second by Mr. Treebrasser. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Please rise for a salute to the flag and a moment of silence. Mr. Harris.
Tonight's moment of silence was in memory of, as we close out the school year, we lost an employee earlier this year, Mr. Grimm of Woodbridge High School, and then earlier this month we lost a friend to the board in our bond counsel, Lisa Gorab. John and I had a conversation about this. Lawyers get a bad reputation, and sometimes deservedly so, but Lisa was the total opposite of that. She was just a genuine human being, nice, a mentor to John, a friend to me from a policy standpoint, and she'll be truly missed as a friend and as a professional and advocate for us as a board. So thank you, everybody, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Do I have a motion to reconvene?
So motion?
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Molnar, second by Ms. Perez. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Here.
Ms. Bourdain?
Here.
Mr. Del Pietro?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Molnar?
Here.
Ms. Perez?
Here.
Mr. Sedana?
Here.
Mr. Treewasser?
Here.
And Mr. Velez.
Here. Will someone make a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting?
So motion?
Do I have a second? Are there any additions or corrections? I have a motion by Mr. Treebrasser. I have a second by Mr. Del Pietro. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Mr. Secretary, please state for the record any notices of bids received by the board.
Thank you, Mr. President. For the 2022-23 school year, we opened the following bid on June 24th, 2022, PSA number 9100, Woodbridge High School exterior renovations at Woodbridge High School.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The Woodbridge Township Board of Education welcomes and encourages active, productive, and respectful participation by members of the public and seeks to protect the First Amendment rights of those who engage in the exercise of free speech at this Board of Education meeting. Members of the public are requested to express themselves in a civil manner with due respect for the dignity and privacy of those whose legal rights may be impacted. The public is now invited to speak regarding the agendas being presented this evening. When you come to the microphone, please provide your name and the section of the township in which you reside, along with the specific agenda item number you wish to discuss, as per Regulation 1100D. Comments must be limited to no more than 5 minutes. No response will be given until you've completed your opportunity to speak.
Good evening, Tom Maris, Fort New Jersey. On the curriculum, point number 16, the Board of Education adopted the following curriculum guides for instructional programs. I'm not going to recite all of them, but I just want to ask which of those curriculums will have DEI woven into them? And also on the financial, and I'm sorry for the loss of your friend and supporter of the school and professional, obviously, on the bonds. But my question about the bonds is, can you give us a projection, given that the federal government is raising, the Fed is raising interest rates, what's going to happen to that bond debt in the long term? How's it going to affect you? Those are my two questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maris. Dr. Massimino?
Mr. Pastorino or Mr. Ali?
With regard to curriculum on diversity, equity, and inclusion, when we talk about multicultural education, which is a big component of it, that can be infused into any core curricular content area or even the related arts. If we want to talk about the contributions of artists or mathematicians or scientists, if we want to discuss historical events in the case of social studies or civics, multicultural education is an opportunity for students to learn about the contributions, influential events in as many subject areas as possible.
Right. I understand you said it can be woven. I was asking specifically, where is it going to be interwoven? We also have Spanish, French. Are you going to teach it in French, Spanish, French, Chinese, as well as psychology, all the rest of these studies, disciplines?
Well, for example, we talk about Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. That's a great opportunity for students to learn about the contributions of Asian Americans in a class like Chinese. So
Wonderful.
there are multiple opportunities here, and we want to take as many as possible so that our students are aware of the many contributions of people of all identities.
Thank you. And the question on the bond debt?
Mr. Wolferman?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Maris, while I don't necessarily see a specific item number, I will say this to you. The bonds that we've already gone out for, those rates are locked in, and
Okay.
future bonds would then be subject to whatever rates are at that time.
Okay, and this time you can't discuss any future plans for bonding? Okay, thank you.
John Tariq on curriculum. All those studies, foreign languages, DEI,
Mr.
And,
Vitarik, what item number are you referring to?
I believe it's 16.
Also curriculum number 16?
Right. You got a lot of stuff over there, which is added to previous years. Are you going to have a time to do all those things, or you have to cut something down, because which is probably the most important thing is that I was in China myself, but having a language is must taken, that people don't want it, depends how many you're going to take and want it. And of course DEI, that's going to be a big issue, because something new. And I'm sure you have books on Chinese, French, Spanish, everything else. The books, it's about DEI, are they written? Did you read them? And who print them? My question would be, if you read them, would you tell me, in any of those books, there's the words of God? Anybody know?
Words of God? Maybe if you can finish all his questions at
Yeah,
once. and then we
Mr.
answer
Vitarik, you'll have to finish all your questions, and then we'll give you a response.
Okay. And, myself, 60 years ago plus, it sounds familiar to me. I had books like this in the school myself. And I know what's leading to. I hope it's not true. But again, that's one thing. But just if you can find out, let me know. And over here, I'm a believer on, 1 second. It's number 6. It's about the JFK High School getting $10,000 to put over here.
All
It
right,
would be on
finance?
finance and insurance.
Okay.
It's number 16. Grant is given to JFK High School. And I understand you want to put a water fountain with a $10,000 grant you're supposed to get it. A refillable water fountain. What is it? That's all.
All right, thank you, Mr. Vitaric. That's all your questions?
Yeah, that's all question.
Okay, first question, curriculum.
Mr. Vitale, I'll be honest, I don't know that I understand your question about curriculum.
Well, my question is this. When I went to school, there was a book about, like any book, big books. Question was, who read those books? I mean, who print those books? And is there the word God in those books? I mean, I'm sure you students, every student you taught, they say, oh God, God. But is there word God in all those books that you're going to take from DI? Because what I went to, you know what was the conclusion? There's no God. That's my question. And what you try to do, teach our kids something that doesn't mention God in it. And every kid, I'm sure that you know, you taught, and so there was sometimes they would say, "Oh God, there's something."
Yes, Mr. Bush.
But I'm showing that when I asked the question, the books, the Lenin.
Yeah, Mr. Vitale.
Printed.
Okay, so I think you've clarified your question. I just don't think there's any possible way for this Board of Education to answer whether or not the books have the word God in them.
Well, you read them, right?
Well, I don't think that any one person at this table has read every book that is on the desks of every kid in the school district.
No, but
we literally would be talking about, thousands of years if you read every book from the beginning.
No, I don't mean that, but the books that you're going to teach the DI, the books that's a new books to American schools.
Again, I don't really your question is hard for us to answer. If the word God, are you asking if the word God appears in any of the books?
Right.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way to understand whether that's true or not.
Yeah.
Through the chair.
There's probably I would imagine there's some books, for example, referring to gods, the Greek gods. Just by one thing, I'm sure that there's some discussion of that. But this is a full curriculum that's, again, you go through this, I think, at every single meeting about the curriculum. The curriculum is mandated by the state, and this district does as good a job as any at implementing whatever the requirements are by the state in accordance with state and federal law.
Mr. Harris.
Through the chair. Mr. Vitale, under Mr. Pastorino, there's 8-9 curriculum supervisors across all the different disciplines. And then when we revise or establish a new curriculum, there are committees of teachers that are formed, and we pay them to construct and present to the supervisor the new curriculum. So these educators, they are responsible for presenting a curriculum. They would be expected, Mr. Pastorino, to surely read the materials before they present them, and then the administration presents these recommendations to the board. Do I have that process accurate?
That is accurate, Mr. Harris.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Harris, what you're saying, so they did read those books?
You would most certainly presume so. We pay them handsomely and appropriately, and you'll see that typically on a curriculum committee. Perhaps even this evening, I don't have the whole thing memorized, but you'll see different curriculum committees. Typically, the work's done over the summer. I know Dr. Massimino, Mr. Pastorino want to do it a little bit earlier in the future, but this is a common practice, and they are paid to identify inappropriate materials, things of that nature. And typically, when we vote on books, I've served on the curriculum committee in the past. We're handed the books. They're provided for and published by reputable companies, McGraw-Hill and Penguin. I'm trying to think of some of the other companies. They're, mainstream book publishers.
All right, Mr. Vitaric, your time's up, but I'll allow Mr. Wolferman to answer the finance question, number 16, concerning JFK.
Mr. Vitaric, I'm not sure about a specific water fountain related to this grant, but if you want to send me an Oprah request, I can give you the further details on it.
Thank you.
Of this grant.
All right, thank you.
Paul Lund, Hope Lawn. I'm not sure if this will also apply under curriculum, number 12, 16?
Curriculum, I believe if you're referring to what they asked about before, it is number 16.
Okay. It's in reference to the CUSAC district performance requirements or reviews, DPRs. I want to know, it says a district must score at least 80 points or out of 100, 80%, to be recommended for certification as a high-performing
Mr. Long,
district.
I'm trying to find that. It's not in 16. Is there another item
I
number?
was wondering if the topic would shoehorn or fit neatly within that, or it has to be more specifically
Yes.
related to
It has to be
16?
specific to an agenda item.
Very good. Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Veronica Komorek, and I am a resident of Colonia and a student at Colonia High School. With the recent news of my school allegedly being a factor that leads to the development of brain cancer in its
Hello,
graduates.
Miss, right now, we're addressing budget items only, the
Oh.
agenda items. Later on in the meeting, there'll be an open public portion where you can address any concerns that you have about that, any other items, okay?
Sorry.
So, no, it's not a
Do I
problem.
do I continue? Or?
No, you can't continue now, but we'll open up for public comment
Come right back up.
in a little
Couple
while.
more minutes.
Anyone else have comments or questions about the agenda items? Agenda items only at this time? No? Okay. Dr. Massimino, do you have any recommendations?
Mr. President, I have 18 items to present to the board tonight.
I make a motion for the superintendent's agenda.
Do I have a second? Second. Motion by Mr. Treebosser, second by Mr. Della Pietro. Are any comments or questions from the board? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Della Pietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Ms. Perez?
Mr. President, I abstain from item number 18, yes to all other items.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
And Mr. Velez?
Yes. Policy and Planning, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Policy and Planning Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, presents the 5 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion, Mr. Harris. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion, Mr. Harris. I have a second by Ms. Anderson. Are there any comments or questions from the board?
Mr. President,
Yes. Mr.
I would just like to recognize number 1, Mr. Treebwasser, in his success in becoming a master board member. So congratulations, Jonathan.
Congratulations.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the board? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Della Pietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Ms. Perez?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
And Mr. Velez?
Yes. Curriculum agenda, Mr. Treebosser.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Curriculum Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, presents the following 16 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
A motion by Mr. Treebosser. Do I have a
Second.
second? I have a motion by Ms. Treebosser, second by Ms. Bourdain. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Della Pietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Ms. Perez?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes. Finance and Insurance agenda, Mr. Treebosser.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Finance and Insurance Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Business Administrator Board Secretary, presents the following 16 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion from Mr. Treebosser. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Treebosser, second by Ms. Perez. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Della Pietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Ms. Perez?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes.
And Mr. Velez?
Yes. Technology agenda, Mr. Sedana.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Technology Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, presents the following 3 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have by motion, Mr. Sedana. Do I have a
Second.
second? Motion, Mr. Sedana, second by Mr. Treebosser. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Sure, Mr. Harris.
I
I'm
just
sorry,
have to
Mr.
make a
Sedana.
comment.
I just wanted to thank Mr. Pastorino and Dr. Massimino about adopting some new things that we're looking forward to for next year, which is essentially a warehouse system in which teachers and staff, as well as, from my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, can have a shared pool of resources when it comes to curriculum. That's been something that has been lacking, and the transparency will now help grow the district faster and build better lesson plans for the kids. So I'm looking forward to it, so thank you for that. And yeah, thank you guys. Great work.
Thank you, Mr. Sedana. Are there any other questions or comments? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson.
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain.
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro.
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Mr. Molnar.
Yes.
Ms. Perez.
Yes.
Mr. Sedana.
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser.
Yes.
Mr. Velez.
Yes. Buildings and Grounds, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. President. Buildings and Grounds Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Business Administrator, present the following 6 items. I move the adoption of the foregoing.
Motion by Mr. Harris. Do I have a second?
Second?
Motion by Mr. Harris, second by Ms. Bourdain. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson.
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain.
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro.
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Mr. Molnar.
Yes.
Ms. Perez.
Yes.
Mr. Sedana.
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser.
Yes.
And Mr. Velez.
Yes. Personnel agenda, Mr. Molnar.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Personnel Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, presents the following. Tonight, I'll be moving 38 items.
I have a motion by Mr. Molnar. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Molnar, second by Ms. Perez. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson.
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain.
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro.
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Mr. Molnar.
Yes.
Ms. Perez.
Yes.
Mr. Sedana.
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser.
Yes.
Any abstentions?
Oh, I'm sorry, I abstain on the name Valerie Henderson in item 18, Linda Treebwasser on item 22, and Michael Henderson in item 25.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes on all items?
I'll have some all other items.
Very good. Mr. Velez.
Yes. Negotiations addenda, Mr. Sedana.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sorry. The Board of Education Committee for Negotiations presents the following 2 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Sedana. Do I have a second?
Second?
Motion by Mr. Sedana, second by Ms. Bourdain. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson.
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain.
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro.
Mr. President, I'll be abstaining on item 1 of the negotiations under the name Frank Del Pietro, yes on all other items.
Mr. Harris.
Similarly, I abstain on item number 1 in the name of Daniel Harris, vote yes on number 2.
Mr. Molnar.
Item number 1, I'll be abstaining in the name of Brian Molnar. Yes on item number 2.
Ms. Perez.
Yes.
Mr. Sedana.
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser.
I'll be abstaining on the negotiations agenda in the name of Jonathan Treebwasser, yes on all other items.
And Mr. Velez.
Yes. Mr. Bush, do you have any recommendations?
Don't at this time.
Is there any old business that should be brought to the attention of the board? Is there any new business that should be brought to the attention of the board? Okay. We will now open the meeting for public comment. If you wish to say something, please come to the microphone, provide your name and the section of the township in which you reside. Again, members of the public are requested to express themselves in a civil manner with due respect for the dignity, the privacy of those whose legal rights may be impacted. Please limit your comments to no more than 5 minutes in accordance with Regulation 1100D. No response will be given until you have fully completed your comments so as not to interrupt your 5-minute opportunity to speak. Yeah.
Good evening. Paul Lund, Hope Lawn Section, Woodbridge. I just wanted to make note that every time we start the meeting with the national anthem, or rather the Pledge of Allegiance, I'm struck by the fact that it includes one nation under God. I know there's been a long time movement to get under God stricken from the Pledge of Allegiance. And of course, the Supreme Court ruling recently is bringing some measure of prayer, even among staffers, and even verbalized, which I think, in my opinion, is a good thing. What I wanted to bring out, it's based on the standards that you guys have no choice but to build a curriculum around. And I noticed that they carve people up, meaning that we're asked to respect and accept differences of an individual's race, religion, gender identity, gender expression, ethnicity, disability, socioeconomic background, and perspectives of health-related decisions. It's much more expansive than when I was growing up, to be sure. And some people, myself included, are concerned that diversity in this case and intersectionality of multiple of these categories, that somehow it's creating a form of tribalism, that rather than bringing people closer together or uniting them under common values and common beliefs, it's more creating divisions. And I think all of us have experienced and seen that firsthand. So again, I'm a skeptic that emphasizing the diversity without pulling together around what we used to consider core values of being an American. I'm also a believer that America is still an exceptional country despite the history. Slavery, as we all know, is not unique to America, but I notice there's not a lot of nuance. There's some talk that history has not been taught. Well, we were taught about slavery. We weren't given nuance as a high schooler or a middle schooler. What I found out is that 4% of slaves ended up in America, 40% ended up in Brazil and the Caribbean. And so we're not a nation uniquely with that mark on our history. I also learned that the abolition of slavery, I think, is one of the greatest accomplishments that all nations have undertaken, and that it freed up the Industrial Revolution. So I'm not here to give a history lesson. What I really want to get back to is that it seems to me that tribalism is alive and well, and diversity training is maybe influencing it in a negative way. The second question I have, or the question I do have, it says families shape the way we think about our bodies, our health, and our behaviors by second grade. And then it says people have relationships with others in the local community and beyond. What I'm curious about is how they frame the family as shaping the way we think about our bodies, our health, and our behaviors. And in next breath, by second grade, people have relationship with others in the local community. Something about that feels like they're opening doors, teaching kids about my body, my choice, even if it's to go around parents, parental involvement. And it feels like there is a certain amount of a push, I'm going to use a phrase, not to get acceptance among people of different genders and gender identities, but to perhaps induct people into what I'm going to call a rainbow army, because it seems sometimes they get quite militant about that. One last thing I'll mention is that President Biden mentioned families of LGBTQ kids should let them be themselves. He's urging families to give kids the license to make decisions about their bodies that many parents feel they're not emotionally mature enough to make. We talked about the amygdala. We talked about the seat of impulse. It's easy to indoctrinate children who have no defense against that indoctrination. And that does, I know I bring it up every time, and you're going to say, here he goes again. But I'm still concerned about that, especially the push into puberty blockers, which have been proven. The off-label use of puberty blockers is still being considered a possible form of child abuse because it's not been properly documented all the other unintended physiological consequences along the lines of brain development, bone development, not just secondary sexual characteristics. So again, my concerns are around the push.
All right, thank you, Mr.
And both on the race side and on the sex side. You're welcome.
There's no question. No. Mr. Long, you're more comments than questions, but thank you for your comments.
So I was just here, but Veronica Komorek and Colonia. So I attend Colonia High School, and with the recent news of my school allegedly being a factor that leads to the development of brain cancer in its graduates, I've become increasingly concerned with the health and well-being of me and my fellow students and classmates. I am aware of the radon and radiological testing done a few months ago, and that the results of those tests fortunately did not find any cancer-causing substances. However, along with those substances, there's a multitude of other potential cancer-causing materials that have not been tested for, such as pesticides, heavy metals, and solvents. Considering the seriousness of the situation, I think there should be more testing done to not only ease the worries of current students and staff at the high school, but also that of their families and friends. Ever since the news of a potential cancer cluster at Colonia High School broke, many people around me have shown their concern for my safety, given that I still attend the school. I've had coaches ask me if my parents are aware of the potential danger at CHS, and other family members have been trying to convince me to transfer out of school. Given that I'm going to be a junior in the fall and I'm already halfway done with high school, I would not want to switch schools now, and I'm sure other students would agree with this stance. Please take into account the severity of the situation and the potential danger that current attendees and employees of Colonia High School are in, and conduct more testing on the school. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Massimino?
Veronica, thank you for coming and reading your statement. I appreciate that. You can sit down if you want. I'll still talk to you. I did receive the email your mom had sent. I did discuss that email with the mayor, and we did send it directly to the State Department of Health and the State Department of Environmental Protection, as they are the governing agencies that were requested to come in, which they did. They previewed the work we did, oversaw the plan, were with us every step of the way. We have reached out to them in light of the very detailed and well-written letter that was sent on behalf, and are asking them to please read that, consider it obviously as the environmental and health experts who guided us throughout this process. I'm not an environmentalist, I'm not a health expert, I don't pretend to be. We have asked them to take a look at that and give it its due consideration, and if there are any additional steps to be taken, we're happy to follow their guidance. So we will continue communication with them, and as I stated in my email, if I hear anything back, I'm happy to share that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Massimino.
Good evening. Robert Schweitzer from Ford's. Just a few questions here. Is there any plan to revert the policy? I don't know if it's this board's particular policy or if it's the state policy regarding the 5 minutes that we're currently given to speak to you now, because I understand that previously we were given 5 minutes and then 5 minutes was allotted for a response. So I would like to know what's going on with that. And then this is from the last Board of Ed meeting. Is there any plan to create an online portal to which citizens could view the curriculum that's being taught to our local students? Mr. Ali, last time I spoke to you, you mentioned the historical lens which education is taught through. Can you expand upon what historical lens means? Because I'm not exactly sure if we would have the same definition, so I just would like to hear your comments on that. And back to what Mr. Lund was saying earlier regarding the push for certain DEI, multiculturalism, or LGBT policies. Is there anyone here that can address what would happen in the case that a teacher would individually try to circumvent parental wishes in favor of these current policies? Thank you. That's it.
That's all your questions?
Yes.
Okay. I can address the 5-minute rule. In the interest of to give everyone a chance to speak, we allow at the beginning of the meeting 5 minutes to address any policy, any agenda items, and then during the course, after the agenda items are gone through, then the public portion opens up again for 5 minutes. You can speak for your whole 5 minutes, and then we'll answer your questions when you're done. And we don't have any, right now, we're not considering changing that policy. Okay. Dr. Massimino, on the other questions?
Sure. Mr. Schweitzer, I'll answer your last question. In terms of if a teacher goes outside of the realm of what they are expected to teach, there's a disciplinary process to follow. So I would say any teacher that goes outside of the accepted framework, accepted curriculum, there are policies and regulations in place for that, and they would be obviously implemented accordingly. With regards to the online portal, I'll defer to Mr. Pastorino, as this is something that he's been working diligently on.
Mr. Schweitzer, in regard to that plan, and in this month's curriculum agenda, specifically item number 14, the board has agreed to adopt the Rubicon Atlas curriculum mapping software. After listening to the concerns of the public and listening to the concerns that were raised, that was one of the thoughts that went into adopting that specific program. So there is a public-facing document that will allow the public to view parts of our curriculum that are specifically asked for that we can release without concern, specifically the units and the resources that are being used associated with those units in those specific curriculums.
Excellent. Thank you.
With regard to a historical lens, whether we're talking about Tuskegee Airmen, Billie Jean King, Albert Einstein, some of the great contributions made to this country by people of all identities, or we're talking about civil rights, Title IX, or Jim Crow, any of these events are discussed in terms of their factual basis, what actually happened in the country. So a historical lens means really focusing on the facts.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Good evening again. Tom Maris, Fort New Jersey. I'd like to take a quick moment to recognize, and perhaps the board's going to do it a little later on, but the contributions of Peggy Rooney. And I want to thank her. I understand it's going to be her last meeting tonight. And over the years that I've been able to work with her, she's been an absolutely stunning and delightful person to work with. Very knowledgeable, very professional, and she will be missed. Let me get on with the rest of this. And thank you, Peggy. Again, the status, as you know, Dr. Massimino, I've provided additional information about where this township is going with the possible acquisition of the Ross Street School. I think at the last meeting, Mr. Velez says it's under consideration. I'd like to know where you are going with that and if you're going to acquiesce to the McCormick administration and sell that property for development. Point number 2. School cameras. I know we've spoken about this before, and we'll probably speak to it again in the future. I understand certain concerns about public viewing and why that might be conceived or perceived as a possible way of someone with ill intent of getting into the school system and harming. But then again, you can also look at a closed circuit monitoring so that that would be done within the classroom, and it would not be public, or chose not to be public. But yet you could tape it so that if a parent were to come in and question something that a teacher or a student had done, you would have a documented record, a visual record of it. And I would ask you to definitely consider that, if not making it viewable to the public, which again, I understand the argument on both sides of why you may not want to do that. My question is, look, and I've seen Mr. Ali's background. He has incredible bona fides in math. Taught within the Newark school system. And I question, he was here, and with the brilliant background that he has in math, you've moved him over into handling the DEI curriculum. Would not someone with a stronger background in history, civics, political science, philosophy, sociology, or psychology have been a better applicant to put into that position rather than a math teacher, when I know this school system needs somebody with his caliber, and he was in that position of instructing mathematics. So my question is, why and why not someone more geared to what the DEI program really is? I had asked some time ago, well, actually by a Oprah request, about mold and mildew inspections, air and water, within each one of the schools, and I specifically named them in my second attempt with an Oprah request. Again, I was rebuffed with legalese about, we don't have to do it, here's all the reasons Oprah says we don't. But it's a simple question. You've either tested or you're not. And I'm asking for the most recent test. I'm not going to ask back into antiquity, like what did you do 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Just when was the last time you tested for any of those in every one of the schools? And I think every parent, student, faculty member, and resident of this township should be able to get an answer to that question. There's no reason that you shouldn't unless you're not doing it, and that's what you don't want to tell us. With Mr. Pastorino, I'm sorry. I got it right last time. I kind of messed it up this time. But going to the DEI curriculum again, and I had asked whether that could be published as to what exactly each one of the curriculum would be. But can you provide a syllabus for it so that at least the parents and obviously the students would know what materials are required, including the topics to be discussed? And one final point is that at a prior meeting, Mr. Bush had called me out about not collecting the data that I had requested via Oprah request. I officially requested a record of anything that I did not collect, and there is no record. So obviously, there was nothing that I did not collect from the school, and I would not like to be charged again with something that is erroneous. Thank you.
Does that complete your questions, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Maris? Okay. Dr. Massimino?
Mr. Maris, I will start my response with I agree with you. We will certainly miss Miss Rooney. She is an absolute standard in her position, and I'll speak more to that later. With regards to the Ross Street Apartments, whether I do or do not support it is irrelevant. The sale of board property is a board decision, so that is something that the board will discuss as they see fit and make the decision appropriately. With regards to Mr. Ali, the previous administration had given Mr. Ali a stipend to start the work on DEI. So he had a year's worth of experience doing this sort of work. When we decided to expand the position, which I think was an excellent move, he interviewed like everybody else and was the best interview. And my attitude is I hire the best candidate for every job that is posted. So he interviewed. I think he has a wealth of knowledge in a variety of areas. He just happens to be pursuing a doctoral degree in mathematics from a Research One AAU Big Ten university. So I think it's easy to say, yes, it'd be wonderful if he just did math. I would be reluctant to pigeonhole any one of his talents. And I assure you that just because he is the director of DEI, we absolutely pick his brain, all things math related, the same way I do Dr. Gencarelli and Mr. Pastrina as former language arts teachers. So I do believe in the versatility of central office administrators, and I think they have a lot to offer beyond just what their assignments are. With regards to testing, the Department of Education has a set list of requirements that every school district has to comply with. If we weren't compliant with submitting what they needed us to submit when they asked us, then we would be found not compliant and serve the penalties accordingly. So I will say it's not a matter of hiding anything. If we didn't do something, we wouldn't be compliant, and there would absolutely be consequences for that. So I couldn't tell you what we do in terms of testing across all 25 schools and when was the last time we tested for any of these various things, but there are standards and codes that we have to be compliant with. That's all I have.
Mr. Harris?
Thank you, President Velez. I just wanted to respond to the one comment or request for potential cameras to watch our teachers teach. Teachers already have a tough enough job. They work night and day, weekends, holidays, summer vacations. If we are going to put a camera on them, they will be scrutinized and second-guessed to no end. We just disagree here. It's not. It's just my personal opinion. It's my opinion only. I suspect most people agree with me, and certainly the teaching profession would. A profession that was under attack for some time, and we may be seeing the fruits of that attack by virtue of less and less teachers applying for jobs, less and less teachers graduating from college with teaching degrees. At the state level, we're doing what we can to try to attract, try to make it, for lack of a better term, try to make it easier, lessen the barriers to get into the teaching profession. So I just wanted to get on the record my personal opinion, the idea of putting cameras in a classroom. I can't speak for the administration. I think it's a terrible idea, and I hope we never entertain it.
Did you not do that when you were teaching kids when they were home with the COVID? Isn't that exactly how they were
I'm
taught?
sorry, Mr.
On
Maris,
video?
your
That was
time
out
is
of
up.
necessity.
I'm sorry, Mr. Maris, your time is up.
Yes, and I'm sorry, my initial question was not to Dr. Mastroeni, it was to the board about their decision about selling the properties. So my question was to you,
Okay,
really
if you-
wasn't,
if
I know
you-
he can't respond to that.
We are taking no position at this time because there hasn't been an official proposal on it. So it has not been discussed by the board. When it is, we'll evaluate it.
I hope you'll keep us informed.
I'm sorry?
Yeah,
Mr. Bush?
And I do want to respond, Mr. Maris, to, I mean, you're not being totally forthcoming about the response to your OPRA request. The request that you made was specifically for, as I recall, a record of the district's response to OPRA requests, printed, copied, or electronic media, which, according to Mr. Bush, I have failed to collect from the districts. And the issue, as we responded to you, was that your request related to a period of 10 or more years ago during which records were not provided electronically. So we didn't have a record because I didn't say it was yesterday. In fact, I think I recall saying that it was at some point. I mean, there were record requests that you made to the district that you didn't pick up. It's not illegal to not pick them up, but the district learned from that, and ultimately the Government Records Council put some more guidance on the production of paper requests. So what we started to do was produce them electronically. Obviously, there was no fee for those, and there wouldn't be anything to pick up because they were sent to you electronically. But there were times a while ago, and you know, okay. Well, I'm sorry that we disagree on this, and we could go back and forth. But just but when you're saying that to the board, that's disingenuous, because the response was not that there were no records. The response was that there was no records responsive to your request. The response was not, sir. The response was not that you didn't at some point leave the board with piles of documents that you never picked up, and that's fine. By the way, it's your right, and every member of this community's right, to make an open request to this board at any time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bush.
Thank you. John Vitale, Woodbridge. Let's go back on Colonia High School. The study was done, environmental group, and of course, I'm glad that they say there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing happened over there that could cause the cancer. And for some reason, if you look at most of the people you talk to, they're all concerned because they think what wasn't done the right way. Part of my question would be, the people did a study. What happened if they were wrong? Are they bonded? Are they insured? Who's going to take responsibility if something happened that they were wrong? And there is something that in the school happened, school grounds, what do you want to call it. Are they insured? Are they bonded? Because I believe if something is wrong there, there's going to be a lot of bad things happen, not just to the school system, to town, everybody else. But I hope they were right. I hope there's nothing there. We all hope so. And the question would be, everybody said, did they study everything? And they said there wasn't a water study, and there wasn't soil study, just air study. Okay, that's number one question. I talked last time about the homeless kids in the schools. And then I think it was great what people do, what you do for them, those homeless kids. They go to school, they got to be fed. And then, of course, now the school is over. There's no school now. And I guess maybe, I don't know, but maybe you would know, what happens to those homeless kids that maybe they have nothing to eat? Or whatever you want to call it, who takes care of it? Is there any other agency or township or whatever it is? And I was made aware of it. If the kid or family from different towns put a hotel in Woodbridge someplace, rather it would become Woodbridge responsibility. And just because they moved in, that's great if you can take her, but if you just can't take anybody that's newcomer for a day or two or a week and just put them in schools without know where they came from. They did all the necessary tests for the to be healthy, what you call it, or anything else. And I'm not talking about being illegals either, but just to make sure they're safe to enter with our kids over there. But what are you concerned about those kids even today? Do those kids have something to eat? Or maybe a place to sleep or take a shower? And my last question would be, last time, not quite a long time ago, Dr. Vissamino asked you, what's the population of the students, number of students you have in schools, Woodbridge schools? And your answer was north of 14,000. And every time I hear a north or from 13,000, 14,000, and was made aware of it that actually we had over 15,000 students this year in schools. I mean, we all know, it's not your own way, I don't think so, but that we need more schools, we need more things to that, and more people come to the schools. And if that keeps going the way it's going, 1,000 kids a year, are we ready in the next 4 or 5 years from now? Are we capable of put all those students in our schools? Dr. Vissamino.
Is that your final question, Mr. Viterk?
My first question would be on the Colonia High School.
Well, okay, but you're done with your questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Massimino?
Sure.
Mr. Vitarak, the company that did the testing is absolutely licensed, bonded, and insured. They would have to be. They worked hand in hand with the Department of Radiology under the Department of Environmental Protection for New Jersey, so they're absolutely a qualified company. Everything they did was obviously preliminary reviewed and approved, and then their results were approved. They're like every other vendor that is licensed and insured and bonded that is tasked with performing something on behalf of the district. So if you're asking if they are licensed, insured, and bonded, they most certainly are. With regard to our homeless students, we work with them to provide whatever we can throughout the summer, whether it's meals, whatever assistance we can offer, we do offer. And with regarding to the student population, that's an ever-changing number. I'm not sure we got more than 15,000. We have students in district, we have students that are registering every day, we have students that we send out of district. We assess it on a yearly basis. We try to do the best we can to plan long-term, but obviously that's always going to be you're planning with the idea of giving guesstimates or hypotheses or estimates or whatever you want to do, and there's people that are paid to do that. So we continue to keep an eye on it year to year. If there comes a point where we have to make some changes or adjustments, that's what we'll do. But that's an ever-changing number.
Let's go on homeless children. Anybody would know what's
Okay, I can probably expand on that. Woodbridge Township has an excellent social services programs, whether it be food pantries. If they're homeless, we have a woman that handles that finds them shelter. So if your question is during the summer because they're not being provided meals from the school system, Woodbridge Township has programs in place to help those families out.
Thank you.
Through the chair?
Mr. Harris?
I just want to expand on this. Our district has a homelessness liaison who works with the families, and under law, it was 2 years for a time, I don't know if it's back to 1 year because of the pandemic, that if you are a student in Woodbridge Township or any school district and you become homeless, for the sake of continuity of education to help the student transition, that student is afforded the opportunity to continue to attend their home school district. It's for their mental health, if you will, that losing your home is hopefully the only disruption in your life, and that your school environment remains the same. Mr. Treeboss could probably speak to this even better than I can verify for you that we do have homeless students that used to live here in Woodbridge Township, unfortunately were rendered homeless, who may live in temporary housing outside of our borders, and by law we are required to transport them and continue to educate them. Then conversely, Woodbridge Township is probably home to students who are homeless, who are transported and paid for by their previous home school district. Mr. Treeboss, could you speak to 1 or 2 years in terms of their right?
I know it hasn't changed yet.
It's still 2 years?
And it's your last place of residence.
Yeah.
And also USDA offers a summer feeding program that any student that is classified as free or reduced eligible for lunch and breakfast can get free meals throughout the summer. So, and that's advertised through a county letter.
Thank you, Mr. Harris and Mr. Treebosser. Is there any other comments?
Good afternoon. My name is Edita Komorek and I live in Colonia. I have a master's degree in environmental science and have been working in environmental consulting in New Jersey for over 16 years. I specialize in site remediation, specifically contaminated soil, groundwater, and indoor air. My older daughter will be a junior in high school, and she just spoke to you. My younger daughter, a freshman in September. I would like to present several issues that should have been addressed during the recent Colonia High School investigation. More detailed version of this letter was emailed to you on June 28, as Dr. Massimino already mentioned. There's evidence of potential fill material at the CHS property. Pieces of concrete indicating possible recycling concrete aggregate, RCA, were observed. And those are just my observation, nobody else's, because I frequently go to the high school with my daughters because they play tennis on the court. RCA may contain PCBs. PCBs are associated with increased risk of brain cancers and other neurological diseases. Per New Jersey DEP, fill material shall either be assumed contaminated or sampled and analyzed for multiple chemical compounds. Among these compounds are brain tumor suspected risk factors, which include pesticides, heavy metals, PAHs, and solvents. A dry cleaners facility is located at 295 Inman Avenue and has been present there at this location since at least 1975. Due to such long history of operation, a potential exists that a dry cleaning agent, PCE, may have been discharged from this facility in the past and have not yet been identified. Based on the suspected groundwater flow direction, which I checked on the New Jersey DEP website, which is southwest towards Colonia High School, any potential groundwater contaminants may have migrated toward and onto the school property. Vinyl chloride is one of the dry cleaning related compounds which exposure is associated with increased risk of brain cancer. People can be exposed by breathing contaminated indoor air, a phenomenon called vapor intrusion. Illegal dumping was not uncommon in New Jersey in the 50s and 60s. It took place in New Jersey pinelands and other wooded areas and resulted in such Superfund sites as Ringwood Mines and Mansfield Trail Dump. There were several schools in the tri-state area recently discovered to have been built on contaminated soil or fill. They include North Brunswick High School, elementary school in Trenton, Ridgewood High School in Greenwich, Connecticut, middle school in Northport, Long Island, and others. It is not unfathomable that it may have happened in Colonia, New Jersey. Fluorine containing mercury was commonly used between 1960s and 1990s. Colonia High School was built in 1967. This type of fluorine may have been used in gyms, multipurpose rooms, cafeterias, auditoriums, stages, and indoor and outdoor tracks. Inhaled mercury vapor easily enters the bloodstream. It can travel to the brain and affect the central nervous system. PCBs in building materials. PCBs are associated with increased risk of brain cancers and other neurological diseases and were widely used in building materials such as window caulk and expansion joints, especially between 1950s and 1980s. Colonia High School was built in 1967. Formaldehyde can be present in floors and furniture. A link exists between exposure to formaldehyde and an increased risk of developing brain diseases such as brain cancer, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's disease. Based on the above missing and inadequate aspects of the investigation, I strongly believe that the suspected cancer cluster investigation should continue. It is prudent and justifiable to assess soil, groundwater, and indoor air to determine if contaminants other than radioactivity and radon do not pose a threat to human health. This opinion is shared by other environmental specialists I consulted. It is puzzling to me and others that the New Jersey DEP would hold us, environmental consultants, to high standards to protect human health and environment, but will not hold themselves to the same high standards and close this case without collecting a single soil or groundwater sample. If funding this additional investigation is an issue, concerned parents of the CHS students are willing to raise funds to pay for it. We ask your permission to allow for this investigation to be conducted. We simply want to make sure that the indoor air, soil, and groundwater at the school property are safe for our children. Thank you.
Dr. Massimino?
Mr. Komorek, thank you. As I said before, I did send your letter off to the DEP, as they are the state experts, to get their input. In terms of funding, if they say yes, there's more to be done, we will make sure we fund it. I'm not looking for the public to fund something that a state agency with the proper authority is telling us we have to do. But we do need that guidance. I'll let Mr. Bush expand more about the legality of having just a random, and this would be random company coming in that's not authorized by the school or the district. They're not a contractor to us to do a study that has not been approved by any of the state agencies. So,
Yeah.
Mr. Bush.
I mean, you know, there are multiple, once the state comes in and the Department of Health comes in and the Department of Environmental Protection comes in to perform the work that they've in many ways taken over the board's investigation. And so obviously with respect to the state officials, they are, they are in some ways less invested in, the political wins or emotional wins. They just want to come in and make sure that they look at this very fairly. And so I think that was a really important step that occurred when they came here to sort of take things over, if you will. But I also think that the relationship between the state officials and the Township and Board of Education is such that the lines of communication are open. So for example, I guess it was your email. I know there was an email from a well-respected expert, like I think you are, from what you've said, to the superintendent, to the mayor. And, the immediate response was, sometimes when people send things, hope no one from the state feels offended if they're watching this video here, but when you send something to the state, you don't always get a response. But because of the relationship that has developed on this particular issue, I think it was important that the email you forwarded, for example, was also forwarded on from this office. I know I think the mayor sent it. The mayor's office sent it. I know the superintendent followed up on that. So to make sure that it was actually reviewed and not just sent to the heap of paper that they get from people complaining about, whether they're credible or not credible. You get the idea. But look, we've said this before. This continues to be a deep concern. Not just to the community, but to the board. And I think that every time that something comes up, they will continue to forward it on, but they have to coordinate. I mean, as a matter of law, they have to coordinate with the state officials on an investigation of this magnitude. At this point, that's where this got. It just had too much attention on it. It was too important to such a large community and such a crucial part of the state to not be, if you will, taken over by the state of New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Okay. Dr. Massimino, would you like to say a few words?
I just want to make a couple comments. I have 3 items to address. One, I appreciate everybody's concerns as community members. What is slightly troubling to me is anybody that takes the podium and looks at one person and questions them. I'll be blunt. I feel like Mr. Ali is unfairly targeted by several members of the audience. He's earned the same degrees in terms of educational leadership that every supervisor has to have. I think his credentials being called into question is concerning. So I work with a talented group of professionals. Perhaps I just don't have the skepticism that exists. I don't have the distrust. I believe in our teachers. I think they do an excellent job. I think they do a hard job. I don't feel the need to watch what they do on cameras the same way I don't watch a doctor perform surgery so that if there's a mistake, I have a air shut case to sue him for malpractice. I believe in what our teachers do, and if they do something inappropriate, we will handle that the way we've handled it for years prior to DEI being a conversation. I think the fact that every time we have a conversation, if we're talking about a textbook, it's related to DEI, or a curricular movement, it's DEI, or a state standard, it's DEI. That's troubling to me because it innately calls into question a resume, or a perspective, or a personality, and knowing Mr. Ali as a professional, and maybe more importantly as a person, it is hard not to be offended by it. So I want to make that statement. Anytime somebody takes the podium and looks directly at one of the central office administrators that I work day in, day out with, and I probably spend more time than I do with my own family, I feel the need to address it. So all I would ask is to please be respectful. He's earned his credentials. He serves the students of Woodbridge well. He's conducted several trainings and in-services and professional development that have been very well received, and the dialogue continues. I just hope that the dialogue can continue respectfully. The second item I have is I'd like to present Mr. Treebwasser with a resolution for completing the requirements of the New Jersey School Boards Association to attain the title of Master Board Member. Mr. Treebwasser, congratulations. The final one is a little hard, so I'm going to try to be brief. The beauty of education is that you spend time with a lot of really good people. I have been fortunate to work with, I think, some of the best and brightest professionals that this district has to offer. When you spend as much time with some people as we have, and I would say it's a privilege to, you get to learn about them. You get to learn about who they are as people on top of who they are as professionals. Peggy Rooney is, in my opinion, the absolute gold standard in terms of what professionalism should look like. There are a number of stories that I could share. I won't. I'll keep them for me and Ms. Rooney. But I will tell you, in every one of them, at some point, she offered assistance or guidance or a smile or a good morning or a how are you. And that, the everyday, the banter, the intermittent running in the hallway, is something that I am going to miss terribly. We all start things new. We all try to do the best we can. It is reassuring to have support of those people that you hold in high regard. So, I want to thank Ms. Rooney for her years of service. I want to thank Ms. Rooney for being a mentor to Ms. Lanigan, who I think is going to do a tremendous job. I would like to thank Ms. Rooney for allowing us to be part of her work family, and I say that very humbly, as her family is sitting proudly on the right side of this, my right side of this gym. And it's wonderful to have them in attendance. I'm so glad they came. But most of all, I'd just like to thank Ms. Rooney for her smile. And it is something that I will miss. And I'm thankful that I got to see it every day as long as I did. Ms. Rooney, I'm going to offer you this resolution. Whereas Margaret Rooney is retiring from active service in the public schools of the Township of Woodbridge after at least 23 years and 2 months in the service of the youth of the school district, and whereas it is the desire of the members of the Board of Education of the Township of Woodbridge to express their appreciation for the loyal and unselfish service rendered during those years. Now therefore be it resolved that the gratitude and best wishes of the member of the Board of Education of the Township of Woodbridge are hereby tendered to Margaret Rooney in acknowledgement of the service which has been so faithfully and conscientiously rendered. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be put on the minutes of the Board of Education and a copy sent to Ms. Rooney. Thank you.
Mr. Wolferman, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you. You know, that's a tough one to follow after all that, because it's all true. And I work with Peggy, and I call her Peggy every day, hand in hand almost every day. And I know she doesn't like being the center of attention at all, and I totally understand that. But it wouldn't be right to go out without recognizing her. Personally, from me, and I know from everybody else who's dealt with her, called the office, an entire staff of administrators, the true epitome of class and professionalism, and never seeking any recognition. Nobody works harder. And on behalf of everybody in the business office and the district, I know they thank you, and I personally thank you, and I know you will be sorely missed by everybody and me especially. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolferman. Are there any? Any board members that would like to make comment, please?
Mr. President, if I may.
Ms. Bourdain?
I just want to thank Peggy personally. Becoming a new board member a few years ago, it's extraordinarily difficult. You don't know what you're doing, and Peggy was there every step of the way, right up until this morning. You know, the personalization that she gives everybody, the smile, the happy person that you always come across, the reminders to get your governance done on December 30th. You know, Peggy, I thank you for making it a very easy transition for me. You will be missed, and you know, every time you call the school, and any school, you hear Peggy's voice, and that is the Peggy Rooney, the sweet voice of Peggy Rooney that we hope to continue to be able to utilize in the future. But that's my request. So thank you, Peggy, for everything. I really appreciate everything you've done.
Thank you, Ms. Bourdain.
Mr. President.
Mr. Treebosser?
Ms. Rooney, I did promise you I'd keep it under 20 minutes. So I don't ever want to break my promises to you. But Peggy's been a colleague since the day I remember when she was hired. And all I can say is, Peggy, there is no better. And I will honk my horn when I drive by your house every morning at 6 a.m. But I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Mr. Treebosser.
Mr. President?
Mr. Molnar?
Peggy, I remember when I first got elected to the board and how much a role of the board secretary's office is to a board member. When I first got elected, I think it was, and I still remember the desk, I think it was Linda, Lynn, and Barbara before you went into the BA's office. And then when Linda left, they're like, oh, we're going to have a new person come in. And it was Peggy. And I just want to thank you for all the years that you helped this board. I mean, you were the lifeline to the board. I mean, watching you grow, you know, in your profession, moving up to the position that you're into now. If there is a definition, if there is a picture in the dictionary of professional, it's your pictures there. And I want to thank you, you know, for everything that you've done for me personally. Thank you for allowing me to still be a board member. And your 55 emails of, Mr. Molnar, you have to do governance for, Mr. Molnar. And I did governance for on New Year's Eve. You were even away on vacation and told Lori that you better get Mr. Molnar to do governance for. And I actually did governance for before I went to a hockey game that day. So I thank you for allowing me to still continue being a board member. But best of luck, you earned it, and congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Molnar.
Mr. President?
Ms. Anderson?
Peggy, I just want to say thank you so much for having such a huge impact on the efficiency of this board. I appreciate the fact that when I became a board member, you were very welcoming, and you made sure that I had everything that I needed to settle into this position. I appreciate your gifts, your skills, and your talents, and I thank your family for sharing her with us. Peggy, you are a gift. And I appreciate the conversations that we had over the years, and I wish you the best of luck and congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Harris?
Mr. President, Peg, you know I can't keep my mouth shut. It is with a heavy heart, but great joy that I wish you a happy retirement. It's been said, consummate professional, gold standard. Not just terms that we share up here, but your peers, your colleagues. You know, I'm the son of a secretary, so you know I know what you go through. As Sue had said, you're not only the voice of the board, the school district. You're also the backbone of the board, and you know you will be sorely missed. You were a tremendous help to me personally, and I know to so many of the other members. Speaking of which, when Sue, Jenny, and I were running, and I hate to bring up politics, you know, Jenny was new to the board, and Jenny would ask us a million questions, and we'd say, see Peg. When you get elected, you know, see Peg. And, you know, that just goes to the resourcefulness of who you are and you know, what a big help you are, as Mr. Molnar had alluded to. We got you a gift, you know, couldn't go without. I'm hoping while you're enjoying your retirement on the beach, you know, reading a book, as I'm sure you will, I want you to think of us with this. In fact, it was 100 hours of a handmade product that you'll receive in just a moment. made with love from one of your former colleagues, a retired secretary who put this together for you. And I hope you enjoy your retirement. It's been wonderful working together, Peggy.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr. Harris.
President,
Ms.
I'd
Perez?
like to echo everyone's statements. Peggy, you were like my mom holding my hand when I got elected. There was an email that you missed, a phone call, even a text. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart. This was a new journey for me, and I'm just so thankful that you were there with me. So thank you for everything. Best of luck.
Mr. Della Pietro.
2 years ago, I was president. We had the pandemic had hit. Peggy was aces. She got me through it. We had the long meetings, wee hours of the morning, taking minutes. We created a pandemic committee. She was always there for me. Peggy, I can't thank you enough. Congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you.
Mr. Sedano?
Peggy, I just have to say one thing. So my nickname for you is Superwoman. And that's how I have her saved in my contacts. So I think that's all I can say because everyone said a lot. And yeah, so you'll always be Superwoman in my book.
Thank you so much. It's been my honor and my pleasure. I thank you all for your kind words. You've been so easy to work for and with. And I look forward to the future, but I will certainly miss the past.
Thank you, Peggy. Mr. Bush
I'm
wanted
sorry,
to speak.
I don't usually participate in the meeting in this way. I usually am providing you all with legal advice or addressing questions from the public. But I just want to say to Peggy, my firm is in, I think, 70 school districts, and we work with a lot of Peggys around the state, and there is no one better than Peggy Rooney. You were the talk of our firm today because it was your last day, and people were sort of saying, what are we going to do without Peggy? I assured them that Ms. Lanigan is not far behind, and that we'll be having incredibly professional support still. But your connectivity to our client as the representative of the board, in conversations with the board presidents that I've worked with over the years, or the superintendent, it's often ends with "Ask Peggy." And so, there's this sense that you have that is I think what everybody's touching on, this invaluable sense that you have of what people are thinking. And I will be direct and honest with even my client in saying there are moments where I believe the answer is A, Peggy said it's B, and it's almost always B, despite the fact that we're the ones that are supposed to know the law. Yeah. I'm incredibly impressed by your work, and wouldn't be surprised if you end up somewhere else working for a top CEO somewhere, or outside the West Wing.
That's not an option, Councilman.
Outside the West Wing or something. You're that level of professional, and I will always remember working with you. And please don't be a stranger to any of the lawyers at my firm or me. We've all become good friends. So thank you for everything.
Ms. Rooney, I echo what everybody else said. You are truly a gem. I mean, a true professional. I, like the other board members, when it came on, it made me feel welcome. You showed me the ropes. My gratitude is unbelievable. We wish you the best in your retirement, and you've earned it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, let's do, Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So motion?
A motion by Mr. Molnar, second by Mr. Treebosser.